I was teaching at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine, teaching the conventional curriculum about how genes control life, a concept referred to as genetic determinism, that our physical, our behavioral, our emotional characteristics are locked into gene programs. And you have to realize, if you're teaching that, what does it mean? What it means is you're teaching doctors to tell patients that their life is controlled by genes and that they don't control the genes, because the genes are self-actualizing. Genes turn on and off, and they control who we are. I'm teaching that. I say, well, what does it mean? Well, what does it really mean is this. If that's true, then we are victims of our heredity, meaning our life is already predetermined to some large degree, even before we're born, by the genes that we receive that we cannot change. So in the classroom, I'm teaching victimization, basically. And in my research, and this is, you got to realize, this is like 48 years ago, I was cloning stem cells. Now, 48 years ago, you say, well, how many people in the world were really researching with stem cells? And I could probably count them on my hand. And I happened to be in a unique place at a unique time, in the right, everything was just right for all to come together. And I said, well, what was my research? And simply, cloning means this. You take one cell and put it in a petri dish by itself. So I isolate one stem cell. You say, a stem cell? I go, yeah, let's simplify it. A stem cell is an embryonic cell. It's just an embryonic cell. And I said, well, what do I call it? Stem cell? Well, I call the cell an embryonic cell till the moment you're born. And then right after you're born, I look at the same cell. Now I call it a stem cell because you're not an embryo anymore. So recognize an embryo cell is multi-potential. It can form anything. Yeah. I say, why do I have stem cells? Well, this is most important for our health, and that is this. Every day we lose hundreds of billions, with a B, hundreds of billions of cells die every day. And this is normal attrition. The issue is this, is like, well, how long can you live if 100 billion cells are dying every day? You have to replace them. And that's what stem cells are for. They keep the number of cells balanced as they die every day. The other ones die. Let's just take a moment, a little sidebar here, and just recognize this. There's a tendency for people to see themselves when they look in the mirror and they say, oh, a single human, a single organism, a single biology. And I go, true, but a human is made out of about 50 trillion cells. Yeah. I go, why is it relevant? Because when I say Bruce, or when you say Dan, that name is not for a single thing. It's a name for a community. I'm made out of 50 trillion cells. And I go, the cells are the living entity. Right. Bruce is an absolute, by definition, Bruce is a community of 50 trillion cells. And so therefore the cells are the living entity, and we in our consciousness are like a government controlling the fate of 50 trillion cells. Okay, so we have to recognize that the power of cells in here, because we are cells. Okay, so I take one of these stem cells, put it in a culture dish by itself. It divides every 10 or 12 hours. So there's 1, then 2, 4, 8, 16, double. After a week, I have 50,000 cells in the petri dish. Most important point, they all came from one parent. So 50,000 genetically identical cells are in the petri dish. I then take those cells, split them up into 3 different petri dishes. Okay, and here's what I do. I change the chemistry of the culture medium. Sidebar, culture medium? Well, if I take cells out of an organism and put in a culture dish, I have to try to recreate the environment from which they came. I say, and cells are like fish. They live in an aquarium, fluid. That's why when you cut yourself open, fluid comes out, because cells live in fluid. So I say, well, the fluid that cells live in is really derived from the blood. So if I want to make culture medium and I want to grow human cells, and I take a look at human blood composition and then try to synthesize human blood composition into culture medium in my dish. If I grow mouse cells, I look at mouse blood and try to, get the composition. So I match the blood type and the culture medium for the cells. Okay? But since I synthesize the medium, I can change some of the composition. So I have 3 dishes with genetically identical cells, but I change the composition of the culture medium chemistry a little bit in each of the dishes.
I mean, you're changing the cell's environment.
The environment, the cells live in that. So it's just like when you look around you, the air you breathe, the water, the food, everything is your environment.
So it's like
cells are
cell in a new home, or a different home than the other.
a new home. Yeah, it's like it's like taking people off the planet and sending them to another planet, which is called plastic petri dish. And then so this
planets that you're developing from the same cell, putting it in 3 different little homes or planets. Got it.
Yeah, 3 different planetary environments. And so what was relevant is that in one dish the cells form muscle, in a second dish the cells form bone, and in a third dish the cells form fat cells. Well, there's one overriding, most profound question. It says, well, what controls the fate of the cells?
Yeah, wow.
You start with the premise, hey, they're genetically identical, so you can't say the genes in this one cause muscle and the genes in this one cause bone. It's they all have the same genes.
Right.
So then it wasn't the genes that made the decision of what the cells become.
Right.
What it is the environment. So each different environment is information that the cell reads, and then the cell adjusts its genetics to fit the environment. That's right there is the most important health-related statement I could ever make.
Absolutely.
The cell's biology is a complement to the environment in which the cells live.
Now, right there, I have to stop you, because that is the old dogma. Was you got diabetes because your mom got it. You got cancer because your dad had it. You got this because your parents had it. But what you're saying is, this is a whole different science that that you've been studying now for many years, that the cell really becomes who we are by its environment, not because it's what it's programmed to be.
Well, let's clear that up just a little bit, Dan, and that is this, is that the cells. Okay, let's talk about the family. Oh, there's cancer running in my family, and anytime we had running in family, that term in conventional biology is translated as genetics.
Right.
What's running in the family is you're passing genes from mother to father to child, down, 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 down. I go, yeah, so every time we talk about something running in a family, it's always been psychologically associated with must be genes that are controlling this because it's in the family. We now know with the new science that since environment is controlling the genes, then basically the families create environments that are passed from generation to generation, environments to thinking and behavior. A child learns behavior by observing the parents, so whatever the parent's behavior is, the child expresses the same behavior. Since behavior is now associated with genetics, then all of a sudden I say, well, when there's something passing through a family, can I attribute it to genetics or to behavior? Well, now we look at both of those, and guess what we find? About 1% of illness, 1% of illness is associated with genes being transmitted from one family to the other. Well, that is profound, because it says, well, if 1% of illness is due to genes, then what the heck is the other 90+% of illness due to? And if it's not due to genes, then what is it? Because if you know what that is, then you have power. But if we attribute everything to genes and find out only 1% is related to genes, then we're missing 90% of where health issues are.
We're not born doomed to,
no.
Basically, just because we do inherit our parents' DNA, we're not born doomed to develop these characteristics. We have the ability to change who we are.